She lost 30 pounds while pregnant with the Vampire King's child, her body hollowing week by week. The ultrasound showed a heartbeat twice as fast as human. What no one knew, the baby was feeding on more than blood. It was absorbing her memories, and the Vampire King could feel every stolen moment through their bond. Elena stood in her bathroom at 3 in the morning, bare feet cold against the tile, watching the numbers on the digital scale flicker and settle at 112 pounds. 6 months pregnant, and 30 pounds lighter than the day she conceived. Her nightgown hung loose around her frame, the fabric pooling where curves used to be, clinging only to the strange hard swell of her belly that jutted forward like something alien grafted onto a stranger's body. She lifted her eyes to the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollowed cheeks made her face a study in shadows and angles, skin so pale it looked translucent in the harsh bathroom light, veins mapping her temples in dark rivers that pulsed with each heartbeat. Her collarbones stood out sharp enough to cast shadows. Her wrists looked fragile as bird bones. Only her belly grew while the rest of her withered, week by week, day by day, hour by hour. And now's the time to stop and subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these tales travel across the world. Now let's continue. The bathroom felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in, and she gripped the edge of the sink to steady herself as a wave of dizziness rolled through her skull. It had been different 8 months ago when she met Lucien Corvus at the charity gala for rare blood disorders. She remembered that night in fragments now, pieces of a puzzle with some of the edges gone soft and blurry. She had been a phlebotomist at Seattle Memorial, good at her job, confident with needles and veins, and the quiet intimacy of drawing blood from strangers. He had been the enigmatic donor who funded the entire new wing, tall and impossibly beautiful in a way that made people turn and stare without knowing why. They talked about the poetry of veins, about how blood moved through the body like verses in a song, about the delicate architecture of the circulatory system. One conversation became one drink, became one night in his penthouse overlooking the city, floor-to-ceiling windows, framing Seattle like a jewel box of lights. She remembered the feel of his mouth on her throat, the sharp pleasure pain of what she thought were passion marks, the way her body responded to his touch like it had been waiting for him all her life. What she did not know then, what he did not tell her, was that the marks on her throat were not just from desire, but from a binding ritual that would tie her life to his forever. A ritual that would change everything. Elena opened the medicine cabinet with shaking hands and pulled out her phone from where it charged on the shelf. 3:17 in the morning. Too early to call anyone, too late to pretend she could sleep. She scrolled through her photos, looking for the ones of her mother, and found them easily enough. Her mother in the garden, her mother at Christmas, her mother laughing at some joke Elena could not recall. But when she looked at the images, something was wrong. She recognized the setting, the clothes, even the angle of the light, but the woman in the photos triggered nothing. No warmth, no recognition, no flood of associated memories. Just data. Just pixels arranged in the shape of a stranger. Panic clawed up her throat. She had looked at these photos 100 times. She knew her mother's face. She knew it. But now, staring at the screen, she felt nothing but a terrible empty space where the knowledge should have been. Not blurred like a fading photograph. Gone. As if that neural pathway had been snipped clean, cauterized, erased. She pressed the contact labeled with just an initial, the private number Lucien had given her the morning after their first night together. He answered on the first ring, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, warm and dark and immediate. "You are losing weight again," he said, not a question, but a statement of fact. "How do you know that?" she asked, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "I feel everything you feel, Elena. Hunger, fear. The exact moment you realized something was wrong. She told him about the memory loss, the words tumbling out in a rush. Told him about her mother's face, about the photos that meant nothing, about the growing terror that she was disappearing piece by piece while the baby inside her grew stronger. There was silence on the other end of the line, a pause that stretched too long, and then his voice came again, quieter now, threaded with something that might have been concern or might have been guilt. "I am coming to you," he said. "Do not go anywhere." She set the phone down and looked at the ultrasound printout taped to her bathroom mirror, the one from last week's appointment. The technician had gone very quiet when she saw the heartbeat, 280 beats per minute, twice as fast as any human child. Elena had asked if something was wrong, and the technician had smiled a smile that did not reach her eyes and said everything looked fine, just fine, unusually active baby. On the counter next to the sink sat her mother's jade bracelet, the one she wore every day, the one she could see and touch but could not remember receiving. She picked it up, feeling the cool, smooth weight of it, trying to summon any scrap of memory about when it became hers, why it mattered, what it meant. Nothing. Just a piece of jewelry, just a thing. She heard him before she saw him, a whisper of displaced air, a change in pressure, and then Lucien was standing in her bathroom doorway, even though she had not heard the front door open, had not heard footsteps in the hall. He simply appeared, the way he always did, moving through space like water finding cracks. His eyes were ancient gold, inhuman and beautiful, and they fixed immediately on her belly, on the swell of life that was slowly killing her. "We need to talk about what is happening to our daughter," he said, "and what she is taking from you." The penthouse was exactly as she remembered it, all glass and chrome and cold light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Seattle skyline like a postcard of someone else's life. Everything was sharp edges and clean lines, except for one corner of the living room where a bassinet already stood assembled, lined with silk the color of fresh blood. Elena stood in the center of the room, arms crossed over her chest, trying to hold herself together while Lucien circled her like a predator assessing prey. But his hands shook when he finally reached out and touched her wrist, fingers pressing against her pulse point, feeling how thin and fast and weak it was. "Tell me everything," she said. "No more secrets. No more half-truths." He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb moving against her wrist in small circles, and then he spoke. "Vampire pregnancies are parasitic by nature. The child does not just need blood, it needs essence. Memories, emotions, the fundamental elements that make you you." She pulled her wrist away from his grip. "You knew this would happen. I knew it was possible. Human vampire hybrids are so rare. The last documented case was 1847. The mother survived, diminished. A shell. And you did not think to mention this before she started, but he cut her off. Before you conceived? You were not supposed to be able to. Human bodies reject vampire seed. The fact that you did not means our daughter is something the world has not seen in centuries. Something powerful." Elena felt her legs go weak and sank down onto the leather sofa, one hand pressed against her belly where the baby kicked and turned. Through their bond, the connection forged that first night with his teeth in her throat. She felt an echo of something that was not her own emotion. Lucien was experiencing her stolen memories as they were absorbed by the child, living moments of her past that she herself could no longer access. He sat down across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, and described her 7th birthday party in perfect detail. The yellow cake with white frosting, her mother's laugh when Elena blew out the candles so hard one flew off and landed in the punch bowl, the paper crown she wore all day, even after it bent and tore. Things Elena could no longer remember on her own. He was becoming the repository of her lost past, a living archive of everything she used to be. "The covenant requires us to report this," he said after a long silence. "An agreement between vampire courts and human governments. Hybrid births must be reported within 48 hours. The child will be monitored, possibly claimed by the court if deemed too dangerous." Elena watched him as he spoke, noticed the way he would not meet her eyes when he mentioned survival rates, the way his finger traced the edge of his crystal whiskey glass once, twice, 3 times. He was hiding something worse. "Is there a way to stop it?" she asked. "To save my memories." "One. But it would mean ending the pregnancy." Her hand went to her belly instinctively, protectively, feeling the rapid flutter kick of the baby inside. The baby who was erasing her bit by bit was still her baby. Still the life she and Lucien had created, still something precious and terrifying, and hers. "That is not an option," she said. Something broke in his expression then. A crack in the ancient mask he wore, and when he looked at her, his eyes were raw with feeling. "Then we find another way. Together." His phone buzzed on the glass coffee table between them, the screen lighting up with a notification. Elena watched his jaw tighten, watched the muscle jump in his cheek as he read whatever message had arrived. "The court knows," he said. "They have requested an audience. Tomorrow night." He looked at her and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time since she had known him, real and undisguised. "They will want to examine you. And they will want to decide if our daughter lives or dies." The summons arrived at dawn, delivered by a courier who appeared in the penthouse lobby without anyone seeing him enter or leave. Elena found it on the kitchen counter when she woke, a black envelope sealed with red wax bearing the Corvus family crest pressed deep into the seal. The paper was vellum, centuries old by the feel of it, thick and rough under her fingertips. When she tilted it under the lamplight, silver ink seemed to move across the surface like something alive, flowing and reforming into words she could barely read. Lucien took it from her hands before she could break the seal, his face going hard and closed as he examined it. The court structure was simple, he explained as he paced the length of the living room. 13 vampire kings and queens representing bloodlines that stretched across the globe. Territories divided and maintained through agreements older than most human nations. He was the youngest of them, ruling the Pacific Northwest for only 50 years, barely a breath in vampire terms. The eldest was Katerina Volkov, who had existed for over a millennium, who remembered empires that no longer had names, who viewed human vampire unions as genetic pollution and had said so publicly at every court gathering for the past 2 centuries. Elena sat on the edge of the sofa, one hand pressed to her belly where the baby turned and kicked with relentless energy, and listened as Lucien outlined the rules she would need to follow. Never speak unless directly addressed by a seated monarch. Never show your throat unless offering supplication. Never, never let them see fear because they could smell it. The way sharks smell blood in water, and it made them hungry, made them want to test you, to push until something broke. He brought her a formal gown, black silk that would have been elegant on someone who still had flesh on their bones. But when Elena tried it on, it hung off her frame like a shroud. Lucien called his tailor, had the dress altered twice in 3 hours, because she was still losing weight even as they measured and pinned. The baby's heartbeat thundered through the ultrasound Doppler when Dr. Reyes checked it remotely. Now 295 beats per minute, a hummingbird rhythm that should have been impossible to sustain. Memory loss came in waves now, not gradual but sudden, like pieces of her mind falling away into darkness. Elena forgot her college roommate's name mid-sentence while talking to Lucien about the court, the words simply vanishing from her vocabulary. Then her childhood address, the numbers and street name dissolving into static. Then the taste of her grandmother's cooking, something she had treasured, something she thought would stay with her forever. Each loss hit Lucien through their bond like a physical blow. She watched him stagger, one hand braced against the window, overwhelmed by the flood of memories that were not his own, memories pouring into him as they drained out of her. That night, in the dark hours before they would leave for the court, Lucien held her on the bed they had shared that first night 8 months ago. His arms were cool and strong around her diminishing frame, his breath unnecessary but steady against her hair. "I am keeping them safe," he said into the darkness. "Every memory. I will not let you become empty." "What if I forget you?" Elena whispered, and felt him go very still. "Then I will make you fall in love with me again, every day, for eternity." They arrived at the court just after midnight, descending into an underground chamber beneath Seattle's oldest cemetery, down stone steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, into air that grew colder and heavier with each level. The chamber itself was vast, carved from living rock, lit only by candles that cast shadows deep enough to hide anything. 13 thrones stood in a semicircle, each one carved from a single block of obsidian, polished to a mirror shine. And in the center of the chamber, gleaming silver under the candlelight, stood an examination table fitted with restraints. "That is for me," Elena whispered, the words barely audible. Lucian's hand tightened on hers until her bones ached. "I will not let them touch you." The court chamber smelled of old earth and older blood, something sweet and rotten underneath like flowers left too long in a vase. The candles provided the only light, no electric glow anywhere, as if modernity stopped at the threshold and could not penetrate this place. 13 vampires sat on their thrones, eyes gleaming in the dimness like predators gathered at a watering hole, watching Elena with an attention that made her skin crawl. Katerina Volkov rose from the central throne, taller than Elena had imagined, porcelain skin and dark hair coiled like a crown, voice like frost forming on glass. "Lucien Corvus, you bring a pregnant human before this court without prior notification. Explain." "She carries my heir," Lucien said, his voice steady and cold. "That makes her court business, only if I choose to make her so." "The covenant requires disclosure of all hybrid pregnancies within 48 hours of confirmation," Katerina replied. "You are 3 weeks late. That is a breach." The court erupted into argument, voices overlapping in languages Elena did not speak, but the intent was clear enough from tone and gesture. Katerina led one faction, her supporters arguing that hybrid children were abominations, their existence a threat to vampire secrecy and the purity of their bloodlines. On the opposite side, Marcus Chen, who ruled the San Francisco territory, argued that hybrids could be the solution to vampire infertility, that their species had been dying slowly for 3 centuries, unable to create new true-born vampires, their numbers dwindling generation by generation. Lucien stood between them and argued that Elena and the child should be left alone, protected under his sovereign right as a ruling monarch. Katerina cut through the debate with a gesture, silence falling instantly. "I insist on examining the human to determine the child's viability and threat level." Lucien moved to stand between Elena and the silver table. "I refuse." Katerina's smile was thin and sharp. "A pregnant human in vampire territory has no sovereign rights. She is vessel, not person, until she delivers or dies. Ancient law, Lucien. You know this." Elena felt hands on her arms, not rough, but inexorable, guiding her toward the examination table. She caught her reflection in the polished silver surface and gasped. Her eyes had faint gold rings around the pupils, a color that had not been there yesterday, that should not be there at all. The baby was not just taking her memories, it was changing her, remaking her from the inside out. Dr. Soren Ashwood approached, a vampire physician who looked barely 20, but moved with the careful precision of someone much older. He carried instruments that belonged in a museum, archaic and beautiful and terrifying. The blood draw was quick, a needle piercing the crook of her elbow, dark red flowing into a glass vial. The moment her blood touched air, every vampire in the chamber went rigid. Dr. Ashwood held the vial up to the candlelight, then poured a few drops onto a white cloth. The blood was no longer fully red. Opalescent streaks ran through it like oil in water. colors that should not exist in human biology. Impossible, Dr. Ashwood said, his voice hushed. She is transitioning. The child is converting her. Then the pregnancy must be terminated immediately, Katerina said, her voice cutting through the shocked murmurs. We cannot allow a human-vampire hybrid to turn a human from the inside. The implications are beyond acceptable risk. Are that my daughter is powerful beyond your comprehension, Lucien said, and you fear her. Katerina descended from her throne, moving with fluid grace until she stood directly in front of Elena. Terminate the pregnancy now, and we will complete your transition properly. You will become vampire, immortal, powerful, Lucien's equal, or continue and risk becoming something neither human nor vampire. A broken thing. Elena's hands went to her belly, feeling the baby kick and turn, feeling the life inside her that was slowly killing her, but was still hers, still precious, still worth protecting. She is not a thing, Elena said, her voice shaking but steady. She is my daughter, and I am not afraid of what she is making me. Katerina studied her for a long moment, then smiled, an expression that held no warmth at all. Then you will not mind a trial period. 90 days. If you survive until the birth without losing your sanity, we will reconsider. But understand this, girl. Vampire law is absolute. If you become a threat, Lucien will not be able to protect you. And if the child proves uncontrollable, she paused, let the silence stretch, did not finish the sentence because she did not need to. The silver table gleamed in the candlelight, waiting. Back at the penthouse, Elena collapsed on the leather sofa, her body feeling like it weighed nothing and everything at once. The scale that morning had read 108 pounds. She had forgotten her father's voice, the sound of it completely erased. She had forgotten her first kiss, a boy whose name and face were both gone now. She had forgotten the name of the street she grew up on, the address that had been hers for 18 years. Lucien sat across from her with a leather journal open on his lap, writing quickly in handwriting that looked like calligraphy. He had been recording every memory he received through their bond, preserving them in ink and paper so they would not be lost entirely. He read them aloud to her now, narrating her own life like a story about someone else. You were 11. Your mother took you to the coast. You found a starfish in a tide pool and named it Frederick. You cried when she made you put it back. I do not remember that, Elena said. I know, but I do, and I will remind you. She noticed the black SUV the next morning, parked across the street from Lucien's building, the same vehicle that had been there for 6 hours and showed no signs of moving. Lucien confirmed what she already suspected. Court surveillance. Katerina did not trust them to comply with the trial period. Every movement would be monitored, every choice scrutinized, every moment documented until the birth or until Elena broke, whichever came first. Dr. Mira Reyes called on video just before noon, her face tight with concern on the screen. Elena, your blood work is... She paused, searching for words. I do not know what to call it. Your red blood cell count is through the roof, but your bone density is decreasing. It is like your skeleton is softening to accommodate something. Accommodate what? Elena asked. I think the baby is developing faster than human normal. The heartbeat, the metabolic rate. If I did not know better, I would say you are not 6 months pregnant. You are 8, maybe 9. The timeline had accelerated. Elena might have weeks, not months. She confronted Lucien in the kitchen where he stood looking out at the city. You knew this could happen, that the baby might speed up. He turned to face her, finally meeting her eyes without flinching. I suspected. Vampire gestation is only 4 months. I thought hybrid might split the difference. I was wrong. What else have you been wrong about? Elena asked, and the silence that followed was answer enough. He moved closer, his movements careful as if approaching something fragile. I have lived for 347 years. I have commanded territories, survived wars, outlasted plagues, but I have never been afraid until I felt your heartbeat slow through our bond. I am terrified, Elena, of losing you, of losing her, of being the reason you both suffer. Elena reached for his hand, feeling the contrast between them. His skin cool and unchanging, hers feverish and failing. Their fingers interlaced, living and undead, human and vampire, father and mother trying to protect something neither fully understood. Her phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. "We can save you. Meet us at Pike Place Market, midnight. Come alone. The court does not have to know." She showed Lucien, watched his face go cold and hard. "It is a trap. Katerina testing your loyalty." "What if it is not?" Elena asked. "What if there is someone who actually wants to help? Then they are fools, or they want something worse than the court does." The baby kicked hard enough to bruise, hard enough to take Elena's breath away. "I am going," she said. Pike Place Market at midnight was a different world from the daytime chaos of tourists and vendors. Shuttered stalls casting long shadows across empty corridors, the ghost of fish smell and coffee and humanity lingering in the air like an echo. Rain slicked the cobblestones, turning them into mirrors that reflected the sparse streetlights, and Elena walked alone through the deserted pathways, her footsteps too loud in the silence. She knew Lucien followed at a distance, shadowing her through the bond that connected them, and through physical surveillance she could feel, but not see, his presence a cool weight at the edge of her awareness. The woman stepped from the shadows near the bronze pig statue, materializing so smoothly Elena almost didn't startle. She looked 30 at most, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that were too old for her face, wearing a long coat that belonged to another era. When she spoke, her voice had the cadence of centuries, each word carefully chosen and weighted. "Elena Marsh, the human carrying Lucien Corvus's miracle child. I have been waiting for someone like you." "Who are you?" Elena asked, keeping her distance, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. "Someone who understands what is happening to you," the woman said, "and someone who can stop it. My name is Isadora Flynn. Dr. Isadora Flynn, though the court stripped my title when they excommunicated me 50 years ago for unethical research." She said the words without bitterness, just stating facts. Elena had heard the name before, whispered in the penthouse when Lucien thought she was sleeping, mentioned in passing by Marcus Chen during the court examination. A vampire scientist who had pushed too far, asked questions the court did not want answered, pursued knowledge they deemed dangerous. "What kind of research?" Elena asked. "The kind that saves lives," Isadora said. "The kind that threatens power structures. The kind that could save yours." She moved closer, and Elena saw her eyes were green flecked with gold. Vampire eyes, but softer somehow, less predatory. "Vampire pregnancies are parasitic by nature. You know this already. But do you know why? The child lacks a critical enzyme, hemotherin X, that would allow it to metabolize its own nutrients. Without it, the child must cannibalize the mother. Memories, emotions, physical essence. Everything that makes you you becomes fuel for the life growing inside you." Elena felt her throat tighten. "And you found a way to stop it?" "I developed a synthetic version of the enzyme 40 years ago," Isadora said. "Tested it on animal hybrids first, then on willing vampire subjects carrying hybrid pregnancies. The results were remarkable. The children thrived without draining their mothers. The mothers survived intact. I presented my findings to the court." She paused, and something bitter crossed her face. "They rejected it, called it tampering with natural law, said that if vampire pregnancies were meant to be survivable, nature would have made them so. They excommunicated me the same night." "But you still have it," Elena said. "The serum." "I still have it," Isadora confirmed. "And if you take it, the baby will stop draining you. Your memories will stabilize. Your physical deterioration will halt. You might even regain some of what was lost, though I cannot promise that. The bond would help, the connection you share with Lucien. He holds your memories now. They could flow back. Elena felt hope ignite in her chest, a desperate, fierce thing. Then why are you telling me this in secret? Why not approach Lucien directly, or the court, or anyone with actual power? Because there is a cost, Isadora said. There is always a cost. The serum has a side effect. It will complete your transition into vampire. Not slowly, not naturally the way it might happen over years of exposure to Lucien's essence through the bond. Immediately. Within 72 hours, you will be fully turned. Immortal, undead, and bound to Lucien for eternity, whether you want to be or not. The hope guttered and twisted into something more complicated. Elena stared at the woman in front of her, trying to understand the choice being offered. Keep declining, lose herself entirely piece by piece, possibly die in childbirth leaving her daughter motherless. Or take the serum, become vampire, save herself and the baby, but lose her humanity forever, lose the sunlight and the warmth of her own heartbeat, and the possibility of ever being anything except what Lucien was. You have no right to offer her this, Lucien said, and Elena spun to find him standing behind Isadora, fury in every line of his body, eyes blazing gold in the darkness. The serum is untested on hybrids. On vampire-human hybrids, Isadora corrected calmly. I have tested it on vampire-animal hybrids with complete success. The biology is similar enough. It is the only option and you know it. Lucien moved around Isadora to stand beside Elena, his hand finding hers, cool fingers threading through her feverish ones. This is your choice, he said, looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. Not mine. Not the court's. Yours. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Elena realized she held all the cards. Not Lucien with his ancient power and his territory and his court connections, not Katerina with her throne and her laws and her millennium of authority, not even the baby growing inside her, despite the parasitic bond that connected them. Elena herself. Her decision would determine the fate of the child, her relationship with Lucien, potentially the future of vampire-human relations, if word of this spread beyond the three of them standing in the rain at midnight. She was not a pawn being moved around a board by forces beyond her control. She was the queen, the most powerful piece, the one who could move in any direction. I need time, she said. 24 hours. Isadora reached into her coat and withdrew a vial no longer than Elena's palm, filled with silver liquid that seemed to glow faintly even in the dim light. You have until the next full moon. 3 days. After that, the baby's metabolic drain will be irreversible. You will lose your mind before you lose your life. Elena took the vial, feeling the weight of it, the cool glass smooth against her skin. She held it up to the nearest streetlight and watched the liquid inside swirl like liquid starlight, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. It was salvation. It was damnation. It was a cage with golden bars, promising safety at the cost of everything she had been. Isadora melted back into the shadows as smoothly as she had appeared, leaving Elena and Lucien alone in the empty market. They walked back toward the car in silence, the rain falling harder now, soaking through Elena's coat. The vial felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. She was halfway to the parking garage when she felt the baby move, and this time it was different. Not just a kick or a turn, but something deeper. Something that touched the part of her mind where the bond with Lucien lived. A presence. Not words, not language, nothing so concrete. Just awareness. Hunger. Need. And underneath it all, threaded through everything else, something that might have been love, or might have been desperation, or might have been both. Elena gasped, one hand flying to her belly, the other gripping Lucien's arm for balance. What is it? He asked immediately, his body going tense and alert. She is aware, Elena whispered. She knows I am thinking about this. She knows about the serum, about the choice. Can you feel her intent? Lucien asked. Elena pressed both hands to her belly, trying to interpret the sensations flooding through the bond. The baby was afraid, terrified in a way that had no words but was unmistakable. She did not want to hurt Elena, but she could not stop. The parasitic drain was not conscious malice, but biology, instinct, a need as fundamental as breathing. The baby was taking everything Elena was not, because she wanted to, but because she had to, and she was aware enough now to know what she was doing, aware enough to feel guilt or sorrow or some infant approximation of those emotions. Mother and daughter locked in a parasitic embrace that neither of them wanted, that was killing one of them slowly and marking the other before she was even born. Elena started crying, tears mixing with rain on her face, her body shaking with sobs she could not control. Lucien pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, and through the bond she felt his own anguish, his own helpless rage at a situation that had no good answers. The baby moved again, a flutter that felt almost like a caress, and Elena wondered if 3 days would be enough time to make a choice this impossible. The vial in her pocket seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, counting down the hours until the full moon rose, and the window of decision slammed shut forever. She looked up at Lucien, at his face carved from marble and shadow, at the eyes that had seen centuries pass, at the man who had bound her to him without her full understanding and who now held every memory she had lost. "What would you choose?" she asked. "If you were me, what would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair, his expression unreadable. "I would choose to live," he said finally, "in whatever form that took. I would choose the future over the past. But I am not you, Elena. I cannot make this choice for you." She nodded, tucking herself back under his arm, and they walked the rest of the way to the car in silence. The black SUV with court surveillance was still parked across from the building when they arrived home, a reminder that whatever choice Elena made, it would be witnessed and judged and potentially used against them. She went to the nursery and stood looking at the bassinet lined with blood-red silk, at the mobile, hanging above it with stars and moons, at the changing table already stocked with supplies for a child who might never have a mother lucid enough to use them. The vial came out of her pocket, and she held it up to the window where the city lights turned it into a constellation in her palm. Beautiful, terrifying, necessary. She thought about her mother's face, the one she could no longer remember without looking at photographs. She thought about the taste of her grandmother's cooking, gone now like smoke. She thought about all the pieces of herself that had already been taken, all the pieces still being taken with every hour that passed. And she thought about the baby, the daughter she had not planned but already loved, the life growing inside her that was both miracle and monster. 3 days until the full moon, 72 hours to decide between dying human or living forever as something else. Elena set the vial on the windowsill where the light could catch it, where she would see it every time she entered the room, a constant reminder of the choice waiting to be made. In her belly, the baby turned and settled, and Elena felt the bond pulse between them, felt the wordless communication that was becoming stronger each day. The baby was listening, waiting, afraid. And Elena realized with a certainty that felt like falling that whatever choice she made, it would change both of them forever, would set them on a path that could not be walked back or undone. The clock was ticking, the full moon was rising, and somewhere in the darkness, the court was watching. 72 hours until the full moon, and Elena's weight had dropped to 104 pounds, her body a collection of angles and shadows that barely cast a reflection anymore. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, trying to unlock her phone, and could not remember the password, the 6-digit code she had used every day for 3 years, simply gone from her mind, like it had never existed. Then her favorite book vanished. The title and author and every word inside it erased so completely she stared at the spine on the shelf and felt nothing. Then, for 30 terrifying seconds, she looked at Lucien across the kitchen and could not remember his face, could not place the features or the gold eyes or the way he moved, could only feel the bond between them like a lifeline in the dark, while her mind scrambled to rebuild the image of the man she loved from fragments and desperation. Lucien recorded everything in the leather journal, his voice growing hoarse from narrating her life back to her hour after hour, reading passages aloud so she could hear her own history in his words and try to hold on to something, anything, even if it was second-hand. The court observer arrived at noon on the second day, a vampire named Thaddeus Crane, who looked 40 and moved like clockwork, every gesture precise and measured. He took up residence in Lucien's guest room without asking permission, setting up equipment that hummed and blinked, documenting every symptom, every decline, every moment Elena hesitated or stumbled or forgot something new. For the court record, he said in a voice like dry paper, subject exhibits memory loss consistent with stage 4 parasitic drain, estimated viability window, 6 days. I am not a subject, Elena said, her hands curling into fists at her sides. I am a person. Debatable, Thaddeus replied, and went back to his notes. Marcus Chen arrived unannounced on the evening of the second day, the San Francisco vampire king who had spoken in her defense at the court examination. Unlike Katerina with her frost and her ancient cruelty, Marcus was pragmatic, his manner almost warm despite the predator eyes and the supernatural stillness. Lucien, he said, clasping hands with his fellow king in the entryway. I am here to help, not judge. He brought medical supplies in a leather satchel, research documents from other hybrid cases printed on paper that smelled of libraries and dust, and a warning delivered in a low voice that Elena heard anyway, through vampire hearing she did not yet fully understand. Katerina is building a coalition. She will move to terminate the pregnancy by force if Elena does not make a decision soon. The memory cascade hit on the third morning, waves of loss so rapid Elena could not track them, could not brace herself, could not do anything but drown. She forgot how to drive, the mechanics of it disappearing, so she stared at Lucien's car keys and had no idea what they were for. She forgot her sister's name, and the fact that she had never had a sister did not matter because the absence felt like loss anyway, a ghost limb aching. She forgot the year, forgot what century she lived in, forgot the concept of time as anything but now. And then she forgot rain. Lucien found her standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, tears streaming down her face, staring at the water falling from the sky with an expression of pure terror. What is it? He asked gently, and she could not articulate why the water falling from the sky terrified her, could not find words for the wrongness of it, could only shake and cry and feel the world crumbling faster than she could catch the pieces. Later that night, when Elena had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep in their bed, Lucien stood with Marcus in the kitchen and said things he thought the bond would keep private, but Elena heard anyway, consciousness drifting at the edge of dreams. I cannot watch her disappear. Every memory she loses, I gain. I am becoming her past while she has no future. If this is what fatherhood costs, I do not want it. You do not mean that, Marcus said quietly. Do I not? She did not choose this. I bound her without full consent. I am the monster the court thinks I am. Through the bond, Elena felt his despair like a physical thing, heavy and dark and drowning. It galvanized her. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling, and knew with absolute clarity that she could not keep waiting, could not keep hoping for a perfect solution that did not exist. She got up and walked to the bathroom where the vial of hemotherapy X serum still sat on the counter, untouched, glowing faintly in the darkness. Marcus had brought more than medical supplies and warnings. He had brought research, pages and pages of Isadora's original notes that the court had tried to destroy, but Marcus had preserved. There was a hidden clause in the findings, something Isadora herself had not emphasized because it complicated the narrative. If Elena took the serum before the full memory drain was complete, the transition might preserve her remaining memories. She would be vampire, but she would still be herself, still have access to whatever past remained. But if she waited too long, if the parasitic drain took everything before the transformation happened, she would turn into a vampire with no human memory at all. A blank slate. Immortal, but empty. Powerful, but hollow. Thaddeus filed his report at midnight, transmitting data to the court through encrypted channels he thought were private, but that Marcus had already compromised. In her throne room beneath the earth, Katerina Volkov read the update on a tablet that looked absurd in her ancient hands. So the human refuses to decide. How predictable. She touched the screen, sending orders to a team already assembled and waiting. If she will not choose, we will choose for her. Retrieve the vessel, terminate the pregnancy, contain Lucien if necessary. The launch window was dawn, 6 hours away. 4 in the morning, and Lucien woke to the Bond screaming danger, a klaxon in his mind that brought him bolt upright in bed. He found Elena in the nursery, vial in hand, staring at the empty bassinet with an expression he could not read. "I cannot remember why I wanted to be a mother," she said without turning around. "The feeling is there, but the reasons are gone." "Then I will give you mine," Lucien said, moving to stand beside her. "You wanted to create something good in a world that is mostly dark. You wanted to prove love is not about memory, it is about choice." She looked at him then, her eyes still human brown, but ringed with that faint gold. Before she could respond, the alarms shrieked, the security system registering a breach at the lobby level. 6 vampires, court-sanctioned, armed with legal injunctions and silver-edged blades that could kill even ancient ones if wielded with skill. They moved through the building like a surgical strike, precise and unstoppable. Lucien met them in the lobby with Marcus at his side, both of them blocking the elevator that led to the penthouse. "Step aside, Corvus," the lead enforcer said, a female vampire with scar tissue marking her throat. "Court order supersedes territorial rights." "You will have to kill me first," Lucien said, and his voice was empty of everything but certainty. "That can be arranged," she replied. Upstairs in the nursery, Elena heard it all, through the bond and through the sounds that carried up the elevator shaft. Glass shattering, bodies hitting walls. The wet sound of violence, of supernatural creatures fighting with everything they had. She had minutes, maybe less. She looked at the vial in her hand, the silver liquid that was salvation and damnation, and everything in between. She opened it, and the scent was faintly sweet, like honey and starlight. She thought of her mother's face, the one she could not remember without photographs. She thought of her first love, whoever he had been, lost now to the drain. She thought of the moment she met Lucien, the memory fading at the edges, going soft. And then the baby kicked, hard and insistent, and a presence filled her mind clearer than it had ever been before. Not words, just feeling, just one concept: stay. Elena drank the serum, all of it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Her veins lit up beneath her skin like circuitry, silver threads racing through her circulatory system, mapping her body in light. Pain followed, bone deep and cellular, a transformation happening at the molecular level. She collapsed, the empty vial rolling across the floor. In the lobby, mid-fight, Lucien staggered as the bond exploded with Elena's agony and transformation, the sensation so powerful it drove him to his knees. He knew what she had done. "Get out!" he roared, and the fury in his voice was primal, inhuman, the sound of a king protecting his mate and his child. The enforcers hesitated, feeling the raw power rolling off him in waves. Marcus stepped in, his own authority adding weight to the moment. "She has made her choice. It is done. Report that to Katerina. The transformation took minutes that felt like hours. Elena on the floor of the nursery, body convulsing, every cell rewriting itself. Her heartbeat slowed, the rhythm changing from rapid flutter to something deeper, slower, more powerful. Then it stopped. Silence. Stillness. And then it restarted, stronger and slower and different, a vampire's heartbeat. Her eyes opened. Gold. Fully gold. No trace of human brown remaining. She inhaled, and the world was sharper than it had ever been, every scent distinct and catalogued, every sound clear down to the hum of electricity in the walls, every texture amplified until the carpet under her cheek felt like individual fibers she could count. She pushed herself up and looked at her hands. Skin porcelain pale, veins faintly visible beneath the surface, but no longer translucent, no longer fragile. Powerful. Lucien burst into the nursery and found her standing, one hand gripping the edge of the bassinet for balance, the other pressed to her belly. Their eyes met, and the bond between them sang, transformed, no longer one-sided but flowing both ways, equal and infinite. "I am still here," Elena said, and her voice was her own but different, carrying harmonics she had never heard before. "I am still me." "I know," Lucien said, crossing the room in 3 strides to pull her against him. "I feel you." She leaned into his chest and felt his heartbeat, the same slow, powerful rhythm as her own now, perfectly synchronized. The bond showed her his relief and his love, and his fear all tangled together, and she sent back her own emotions, the connection deeper than it had ever been. Elena touched her belly and felt the baby move, but something was different. The heartbeat had slowed to match hers, steady and strong, no longer the frantic hummingbird pace. The parasitic drain had stopped. But then she felt something else, the baby's consciousness pressing against hers through the bond, fully formed and aware and present in a way that should not be possible for an unborn child. A single word formed in her mind, clear as a bell, resonant with meaning and recognition and love. "Mother." "She is talking to me," Elena whispered. "What is she saying?" Lucien asked. "She is saying she is ready. She wants to be born. Now." Elena's body began labor 4 weeks early by human standards, but perfectly timed for a hybrid. The contractions hitting like a wave crashing over her, sudden and overwhelming. Dr. Reyes rushed to the penthouse with Isadora in tow, the vampire scientist emerging from hiding now that Elena had taken the serum and there was nothing left to lose by revealing her involvement. Vampire birth was faster and more violent than human, contractions lasting seconds instead of minutes, Elena's body adapting in real time to accommodate something that was neither fully human nor fully vampire. Her bones shifted beneath her skin, her pelvis widening with a grinding sensation she could feel through her entire skeleton. She gripped the bed frame and nearly broke it, her new vampire strength making the metal creak and bend under her fingers. "This is unlike any labor I have seen," Dr. Reyes said, her hands steady despite the impossible situation unfolding before her. "Her body is adapting in real time." "The serum is working," Isadora confirmed, setting up monitoring equipment that beeped and hummed. "The baby is not draining her anymore. It is synchronizing with her." Lucien stayed at Elena's side through every contraction, holding her hand even when she crushed his fingers hard enough to bruise even vampire flesh. He did not flinch. Through the bond, his voice steady and calm. "I am here. You are not alone." Between contractions, Elena gasped for breath that she no longer technically needed, her body clinging to human habits even as it transformed. "I can feel her. She is magnificent and terrifying." Like her mother, Lucien said, and despite the pain, Elena almost smiled. The complication came as the baby crowned, alarms blaring through the penthouse security system. Thaddeus's voice crackled over the intercom, flat and emotionless. Court delegation incoming. Katerina Volkov personally. ETA 15 minutes. Marcus, who had stationed himself outside the bedroom door, swore under his breath. They are coming to claim the child the moment she is born. Then they will have to wait, Elena said through gritted teeth, and pushed. One final contraction, her entire body bearing down, every muscle straining. And then a cry filled the room, not a wail but a sound like silver bells and distant thunder, something beautiful and otherworldly. Dr. Reyes caught the baby, impossibly beautiful, even covered in blood and vernix, porcelain skin and dark hair slick against her tiny skull. Her eyes opened immediately, something no newborn should be able to do, and they were heterochromatic, one gold like Lucien's, and one deep brown like Elena's had been. Human and vampire, perfectly balanced. Elena reached for her daughter with shaking hands, and Dr. Reyes placed the baby on her chest. The infant did not cry after that first sound. She stared at Elena with an intelligence far beyond newborn awareness, her gaze focused and intent. Through the bond, Elena felt her, fully sentient, aware, curious, a consciousness that should not exist in something minutes old. "Hello, little one," Elena whispered, weeping. "I am your mother." The baby's tiny hand wrapped around Elena's finger, the grip surprisingly strong, and a pulse of warmth flooded through the bond. Love, recognition, a knowing that transcended words or memory or anything Elena had ever experienced. "What should we call her?" Lucien asked, his voice breaking on the last word, and Elena looked down at the miracle in her arms. "Seraphine. It means fiery one, and she burned away everything to be born." The door to the penthouse did not literally explode inward, but the force of Katerina Volkov's presence made it feel that way, the air pressure changing, the temperature dropping. She strode into the bedroom flanked by 6 court members, her ancient eyes taking in the scene with cold assessment. The child. Now. Lucien moved between Katerina and the bed, every line of his body radiating protective fury. "You have no claim here. Hybrid births are court property under the covenant," Katerina said. "The child will be examined, tested, and if deemed viable, raised under court supervision." "She is not property," Elena said, still holding Seraphine against her chest. "She is my daughter." Katerina approached the bed, her movements fluid and predatory. Seraphine's eyes tracked her, following the ancient vampire's approach with unnerving focus. For a moment, their gazes locked, gold meeting gold, and Katerina froze. "This child," she said slowly, something like uncertainty coloring her voice. "She is not empty. She is aware." Seraphine made a sound, not a cry but a hum, a vibration that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone present. The lights in the penthouse flickered. Every vampire in the room went still as Seraphine's presence radiated outward, a pressure, a weight, a force that should not exist in something so small and newly born. "My lady," one of Katerina's enforcers said, his voice tight. "The child is projecting. I can feel her." "Impossible," Katerina said. "Newborns do not have that kind of control." Isadora stepped forward, holding medical scans and printouts. Because she is not just a newborn, the serum did not just stop the drain, it accelerated her cognitive development. She has the awareness of a child months old, possibly older. She is a prodigy. "Which makes her more dangerous," Katerina said. Elena rose from the bed, weak but defiant, Seraphine cradled in her arms. "You want to take her? You will have to go through me. And I am not human anymore. I am not afraid of you." Katerina studied her for a long moment, taking in the gold eyes, the vampire stillness, the fierce maternal protectiveness radiating from every pore. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. "No. You are not." "Very well," Katerina said, her tone shifting to something more calculating. You wish to keep the child? Prove she is not a threat. In 3 months, present her before the full court. If she demonstrates control and stability, she remains with you. If she shows signs of danger, uncontrolled feeding, aggression, instability, she becomes court property. The terms were simple and brutal. Seraphine would be monitored daily. Elena and Lucien would have to train her, socialize her, prove she could exist without endangering humans or vampires. Any incident, any at all, and the deal would be void. Lucien looked at Elena, and through the bond, "We can do this." "Agreed," he said aloud. Katerina turned to leave, her entourage falling in behind her. At the threshold she paused. "One more thing. The child's blood. It carries antibodies we have never seen. Isadora's serum worked too well. Seraphine is not just hybrid, she is evolved, and evolution, Lucien, is never without consequence." She left, and the room seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight of ancient power lifting. Elena looked down at Seraphine, at the baby's mismatched eyes staring back with impossible awareness. The hardest part was not over. It was just beginning. 3 days after the birth, Elena had recovered physically, vampire healing knitting together everything that had been torn and stretched and transformed. But emotionally, she was unmoored, adrift in a reality she barely recognized. Seraphine did not sleep like a normal baby. She watched, observed, learned. Her eyes tracked movement across the room, followed conversations she should not be able to understand, studied faces with an intensity that was unnerving. The feeding problem became apparent on the second day. Seraphine refused bottles of blood, whether human or synthetic. She would not latch for breastfeeding, and Elena's milk production had stopped when she turned vampire anyway. By the third day, the baby was losing weight, her cries growing fainter and more heartbreaking. "She needs to eat," Dr. Reyes said, her professional calm fraying at the edges. "She is starving." "I have tried everything," Elena said, pacing the nursery with Seraphine in her arms. "She will not take it." Lucien stood at the window, watching the city below. "She is not refusing food. She is refusing the wrong kind of food. Hybrids may need something else entirely." They experimented through the afternoon and into the evening, trying every variation they could think of. Human blood, refused. Vampire blood, refused. Animal blood, refused. Synthetic blends carefully calibrated by Isadora, refused. Seraphine grew weaker with each failed attempt, her skin losing the healthy flush it had at birth, her movements becoming sluggish. In the middle of the night, Elena sat in the rocking chair holding her daughter and weeping. "I do not know what you need. Please, baby, tell me." Through the bond, now extended to include Seraphine in a triangle of connection, a feeling came. Not words, not images, just sensation, warmth, connection, life. Isadora arrived at dawn with a hypothesis that felt both obvious and impossible. Vampire young feed on blood. Human babies feed on milk. But Seraphine is neither. What if she needs essence? The same thing she took from you in the womb. "You mean memories?" Elena asked, horror creeping into her voice. "No. Emotion. Life force. Love." Isadora taught Elena an ancient vampire technique, emotional transference, a way of channeling energy through physical contact and conscious intent. Elena held Seraphine's skin to skin, the baby's tiny body warm against her chest, and focused on every ounce of love she felt. For this child. For Lucien. For the life they were trying to build against impossible odds. She pushed it through the bond, feeling the energy flow from her core outward. Seraphine latched, not to skin, but to presence, and Elena felt the pull. It was gentle and warm, nothing like the parasitic drain of pregnancy. This was mutual, a circuit of energy where Elena gave love and Seraphine gave back trust and contentment, and something that felt like gratitude. The baby's color returned, the healthy flush spreading across her cheeks. She sighed, content, and for the first time since birth, fell into true sleep. Elena felt depleted but whole, emptied of something she could not name, but filled with something better. How often will she need this? Lucien asked quietly. Daily, for now, Isadora said. As she grows, perhaps less. But she will always need emotional connection to thrive. Isolation would starve her. Elena watched Seraphine sleep in the bassinet, the baby's hand curled around the jade bracelet that had somehow made its way into the crib. Looking at it, holding her daughter, a memory surfaced that had been lost. Her mother giving her the bracelet the day she found out she was pregnant, her mother's voice saying, "For luck." "I remember," Elena whispered. "The bond goes both ways now," Lucien said from behind her. "She is giving back what she took. She is healing me." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Thaddeus entered without waiting for permission, tablet in hand. "Daily report for the court. How is the child feeding?" "She is fine," Elena said, her body instinctively moving between Thaddeus and the bassinet. Thaddeus reviewed footage from the nursery cameras they had not known were there. Emotional transference, fascinating, and concerning. "Why concerning?" Lucien asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Because if the child requires emotional energy to survive, and that energy runs out—" Thaddeus paused, let the implication hang in the air. He did not need to finish. Lucien and Elena exchanged a look across the nursery. The clock was still ticking. The court was still watching. And they had 3 months to prove that Seraphine could exist in a world that had never seen anything like her before. Week 1 and Seraphine began recognizing faces, her mismatched eyes tracking Elena and Lucien across the room, a smile spreading across her tiny face when they came near. But strangers she watched with wary intelligence, her gaze assessing and careful, in a way no infant should be capable of. Week 4, and she sat up on her own, back straight and balance perfect, an achievement that should have taken months but came to her as naturally as breathing. Thaddeus noted it in his report, his stylus scratching across the tablet screen, while Seraphine watched him with those unnerving eyes. Week 8, and she spoke her first word. Not mama or dada, but light, spoken clearly while pointing at a sunbeam cutting through the window, the golden shaft of illumination making her heterochromatic eyes shine. Elena wept, pulling her daughter close, feeling through the bond that Seraphine understood not just the word, but the concept, the beauty of it, the warmth. Week 12 arrived too quickly and too slowly, the day of the court presentation looming like a thunderhead on the horizon. Elena dressed Seraphine in a white gown embroidered with silver thread, Lucien's family crest worked into the fabric at the hem. The baby was calm, curious, utterly unafraid as she touched the delicate embroidery with her small fingers. "Are you ready?" Lucien asked, and Elena met his eyes in the mirror. "No, but we are going anyway." The court chamber looked exactly as it had 3 months ago, obsidian thrones arranged in their semicircle. 13 ancient vampires watching as Elena and Lucien entered. But this time, Elena walked in as an equal. Vampire herself now, mother and fighter, her spine straight and her chin high. Seraphine rode in her arms, wide eyes taking in everything, no fear in her small body. Katerina Volkov rose from her throne, her face unreadable. "Show us the child is stable. Show us she can control her needs." Elena walked to the center of the chamber and placed Seraphine on the floor, the white gown pooling around her as she sat. The baby looked around at the circle of predators, her gaze moving from face to face with that same assessing intelligence. Then she did something extraordinary. Through the bond, Elena felt it the moment before it happened, Seraphine reaching out not just to her parents, but to every vampire in the room. A pulse of warmth radiated from the child, curiosity and greeting bundled together in a sensation that bypassed words entirely. Every ancient vampire in the chamber went still, shock rippling through the assembly. Marcus Chen smiled, something genuine and wondering crossing his face. She is saying hello. This child is more powerful than any hybrid on record, Katerina said, but her voice held uncertainty instead of condemnation. Katerina gestured to one of her enforcers, a male vampire with scars crossing his throat. Approach the child. Show hostile intent, controlled, no real danger. The vampire moved forward, his body language shifting into something predatory, a growl building in his chest, fangs sliding down. Seraphine did not cry. She looked up at him with those mismatched eyes, one gold and one brown, and reached for his hand. The moment her small fingers touched his, the hostility drained away, like water through a sieve. The vampire dropped to his knees, disarmed by the child's innocence, by the pure openness radiating from her. Impossible, Katerina breathed. She nullified his aggression. Not nullified, Isadora said from where she stood beside Marcus. She offered empathy, and he chose to accept. The court erupted into debate, voices overlapping in multiple languages, arguments flying back and forth about precedent and danger and potential. Elena stayed in the center of it all, Seraphine now in her arms again, feeling the baby's heartbeat steady and calm against her chest. Finally, Katerina raised one hand, and silence fell. The child is unprecedented. Dangerous in potential, yes, but not malicious. She paused, seemed to choose her next words carefully. She will remain with Lucien Corvus and Elena Marsh. However, she will be monitored until her 10th year. At that time, we will reconvene. It was a conditional victory, not freedom but reprieve, and Elena felt her knees go weak with relief. Seraphine cooed and grabbed a handful of Elena's hair, utterly unconcerned with the fate that had just been decided for her. Outside the court chamber, Lucien pulled Elena into an embrace, careful of the baby between them. We did it. She did it, Elena corrected. She showed them who she is, and who she will become, Lucien added, pressing a kiss to Elena's temple. 6 months later, and Elena stood on the same bathroom scale that had tracked her decline during pregnancy, watching the numbers settle at 128 pounds. Healthy, whole. She looked in the mirror and saw gold eyes staring back, vampire eyes, but the face was hers. She remembered her mother, could picture her clearly now without needing photographs. She remembered her father, his voice, the way he laughed. She remembered her past in vivid detail, the memories that had been stolen slowly returning through the bond with Seraphine, the baby giving back what she had taken in the womb. Seraphine was walking now, talking in full sentences that were eerily articulate for a child her age, reading picture books with genuine comprehension. She was not a normal child, would never be a normal child, but she was their child and that was enough. The surveillance had lessened. Thaddeus visited once a week instead of daily, his reports growing more routine and less ominous. The court was watchful, but no longer hostile, content to observe from a distance. A quiet evening found Elena reading to Seraphine in the nursery. The little girl curled in her lap, one hand playing with the jade bracelet on Elena's wrist. Lucien was in the kitchen attempting to cook human food, an endeavor that usually ended in disaster, but that Elena loved him for trying anyway. The bassinet had been replaced with a toddler bed months ago. The nursery transformed into a lived-in space full of books and toys and the warm chaos of childhood. As Elena tucked Seraphine into bed, the little girl looked up at her with those remarkable eyes. "Mama, why do the people watch us?" Elena chose her words carefully, smoothing dark hair back from Seraphine's forehead. "Because you are special. And sometimes, people are scared of special." "Are you scared?" Seraphine asked. "Not anymore," Elena said, and it was true. Seraphine reached for Elena's hand, her small fingers wrapping around her mother's larger ones. And through the bond came a flood of emotion. Love, trust, gratitude, and underneath it all, understanding. Elena realized with a start, that Seraphine comprehended far more than they had given her credit for. She had been listening to every conversation, learning from every interaction, preparing herself for a world that would never stop watching her. Later, after Seraphine had fallen asleep, Elena joined Lucien on the couch. He pulled her against his side, and they sat in comfortable silence for a long moment. "She is going to be extraordinary," Lucien said quietly. "She already is," Elena replied. "And when she is older, the court will come for her again. Not to harm her, to recruit her. Katerina sees her potential. Then we will teach her to choose for herself," Elena said firmly, "to be powerful without being weaponized." "Can that be done?" Lucien asked. "We will find out." Late that night, after Lucien had gone to bed and Elena sat alone in the living room with a book she was not really reading, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message and felt her breath catch. "Congratulations on your victory. But you should know, Seraphine is not the only hybrid born this year. There are others, and not all of them have parents willing to protect them. If you want to save them, meet me, same place. Midnight." The sender was identified as Dr. Isadora Flynn. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment, then carried the phone to the bedroom. Lucien was still awake, lying in the dark with his hands behind his head. She showed him the message without a word. He read it, his jaw tightening. "It could be a trap, or it could be the beginning of something bigger," Elena said. "If there are other children like Seraphine, they deserve a chance." "You want to become their protector?" Lucien asked. "I want to become their hope," Elena said. Lucien studied her face in the dim light, then nodded slowly. "Then we go together." Elena returned to the window, looking out at the city lights spread below like stars fallen to earth. Behind her, she could hear Seraphine's soft breathing through the baby monitor, steady and peaceful. Lucien came to stand beside her, his hand settling on her shoulder. On the windowsill sat the empty vial from Isadora's first message, the one that had contained the serum that saved her life and transformed her forever. She had kept it as a reminder of what they had survived, of the impossible choice she had made and the consequences that followed. "We survived," Elena said quietly, more to herself than to Lucien. "Now we help others do the same." The city stretched out before them, full of secrets and shadows, and other families like theirs, other hybrids struggling to exist in a world that feared them. Seraphine had been the first, the miracle child who proved that human and vampire could create something beautiful together. But she would not be the last. And somewhere out there in the darkness, other children were waiting for someone to fight for them the way Elena and Lucien had fought for Seraphine. The future was uncertain, the path forward unclear. The court would always be watching, always waiting for a reason to intervene. But Elena was no longer the frightened human who had stepped into that bathroom 6 months pregnant and 30 pounds lighter, watching her memories disappear one by one. She was vampire now, mother and warrior, bound to Lucien and to Seraphine through bonds that could not be broken. She had survived the impossible, and now she would make sure others could do the same. Tomorrow they would meet Isadora at Pike Place Market and learn about the other hybrids, the other families in need. Tomorrow they would begin building something new, a network of protection and support for children the world was not ready to accept. But tonight, she stood at the window with her family around her, whole and healed and ready for whatever came next. The empty vial caught the light, a reminder of transformation and survival. Elena touched it once, then turned away from the window. There was work to be done, children to save, a future to build. And for the first time since this journey began, she felt ready for all of it.